and I put out a poll recently. A lot of you guys have expressed interest in more physics simulations. So let's go ahead and hop into it. All right, so we're in a new document here. I'm just going to start out by saving this to my desktop as simulation. All right. And again, we have almost zero plan going into this, but I had an idea earlier where we can fill up something with a bunch of spheres. So let's go ahead and add in a sphere. So actually, let's add in a plane first, kind of scale that up. Give our scene just a little something here. I'm going to add an HDRI. I'm just going to set up the scene first, and then we'll get into everything else. Where in the world are my HDRIs? Should be in here. HDRIs, and let's just select... How about this outdoor scene right here? And let's go over to our rendered view. I'm going to go to Cycles, GPU. All right, we're looking good. Snap to the camera, save real quick. I'm just going to give our floor a dark shader so we can kind of see what's going on. Delete the cube. Sorry, Mr. Default Cube. And then I'm going to go ahead and even out the camera as well. I'm going to make that 7, -7, 5, and 45 degrees. Now we're like perfectly centered in on our scene here. I'm also going to use an orthographic perspective and completely change my dimensions of my project to 1080 by 1920, which is Instagram portrait native. Max samples 300. We'll just set up some quick render settings. That looks good. And we'll get into everything else as we go. So far, I'm pretty happy with what we have. So I'm going to show you guys how to create like a really simple physics simulation today. What we're probably going to do is just kind of go with it. There's really no plan. But let's just go ahead and see what kind of like things we can get away with here. So let's go ahead to add mesh. Let's add in let's add in a cylinder. All right. I'm going to go back to solid view, press period to kind of zoom in on that cylinder. Modifiers. I'm going to add a bevel. I'm going to add an edge split, and I'm going to add a subdivision surface. Now the reason we add that edge split is because if we don't have that here and we try to increase our subdivision surface, you'll see that it really messes up our cylinder. So you need that edge split to maintain those subdivisions. And that looks pretty good. I'm going to adjust the bevel a little bit. That looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that overall. Okay, that's perfect. Oops, I don't want to keyframe that. All right, so we have 3 subdivisions, and I'm going to save. And then I think what I want to do is I actually want to inset the top and bring it down. So before we do that, though, I'm going to actually go ahead and apply all these modifiers. And then I'm going to tab into edit mode. Oof. Let me undo that. Hold on. I actually do not want to do that just yet. I want to not apply the modifiers yet. I want to tab into edit mode. I want to click this top face. I want to inset faces, and I'm just going to drag this circle in to right about there. And then I'm going to do it one more time. And then I'm going to press EZ to extrude. Oops. Why is that not snapping to Z? There we go. All right, for some reason it's not snapping to the Z axis, and I don't know why. I apologize, guys. I'm just going to press GZ. There we go. GZ to bring that down. And we just want to create kind of like a little cup here. Now I'm going to tab back out of edit mode, and we're good to go. Let me just make sure everything looks good in wireframe. So again, you guys can you can use this method I'm using right now to see through the side, and you can bring it down even more towards the bottom. That looks pretty good. And if you want to, you can scale it up a little bit, make it a bit more even. Now that looks pretty good. All right, so we have our cup. So now the plan is I'm going to go ahead and apply all the modifiers, and we should have some decent geometry. Looks good enough to me. I'm going to shade it smooth. I'm also going to turn on auto smoothing as well. And I'm just going to save this. Now this is going to act as our physics object. I actually want to fill this up with maybe some spheres or cubes or something. I just want to use this as a physics object. So I'm going to snap back to the camera, go to my rendered view. I'm just going to give this a nice chrome shader. So I'm just going to create a new principal BSDF, raise that metallic, lower that roughness, and that is more or less a chrome shader. The reason it looks so strange is because we're in orthographic view. I'll raise the roughness a little bit. It should be almost perfectly reflective though, especially if we lower the roughness all the way. Yeah, that's chrome right there. But I'm gonna raise the roughness a little bit because it does look kind of strange inside. Snap back to the camera view. I'm actually gonna bring our floor plane up to meet the bottom of the cylinder here. That looks perfect. And now we have everything pretty much set up the way we need to. So now, what do we want to fill this with, and how do we want to fill it? I'm thinking, guys, we take this shape, cut the bottom off, and just have some kind of a tube from the top filling this up with either liquid or with spheres. If we do spheres, it'll probably be super simple. So, hi, bro, keep going. Love, love. Hi, this is my account. Hey, how's it going? Glad you could make it today. All right, guys, again, we are on YouTube as well if you want to watch this in 4K. So I'm going to zoom in here, go back to my solid view. I'm going to add in a sphere. All right, use UV sphere. I'm going to scale it down to 0.2, and I'm going to move it up. Now let's look at this from top-down view. This is perfect. We can use this size sphere to fill up our cylinder. So I'm going to click on our sphere. I'm going to shade it smooth, and I'm just going to give it some random color. I'll just make it blue for now so we can see it. Slightly metallic, and maybe like a low roughness. I think that looks pretty good. And again, there's really not much to the actual shading. I'm just throwing in a color so we can see our simulation. So with my sphere selected, I am going to give this a physics property. I'm going to give this a rigid body. Now don't forget to apply your scale. Object applies scale so that the physics apply properly. And we could use convex hull, but in this case I'm going to use sphere. And as you can see, if you zoom in, it's going to take the shape of a sphere here. Active, dynamic, should be good to go there. Now I'm going to click on my little cup here, add a rigid body, and we're going to make this passive. Instead of convex hull, we're going to use mesh. Now if we press play, we should have some physics here, so let's go ahead and just take a look. And as you can see, we do have physics, and it stops right along the cup. Again, if we didn't have physics on the cup, it would just go through. We don't need physics on the floor right now. Actually, we can add them. So I'm just going to actually click on the floor. I'll add a passive rigid body. That's fine. And then convex hull should be fine. Let's go ahead and check to make sure that's working. And we're good to go. All right, so another thing we can do, we're going to bring this back to the center. So let's make sure it's above our cup here, guys. We are good to go. It's above the cup. And then what we want to do is either duplicate this a bunch of times and then adjust the settings, or we could somehow create an array and then apply that array and separate everything. There's a lot of ways that we can do this. For example, if we click on our, if we get rid of our rigid body for now and make an array, and we make that go up on the z-axis, let's just go ahead and space these out just a little bit. I'll do 1.1 for the spacing, and I'm just going to create an array of 10, right? I'm just showing you guys again how to easily create this physics simulation. So we have an array of 10. I'm going to apply the array. So you click this little drop down, apply, and then I'm going to tab into edit mode, hit A, right click, separate by loose parts. And what that's going to do is it's going to take every single one of these, because before this was all one object, it is now separate objects. And then you want to highlight all these, and you want to right click and go to set origin to geometry. And as you can see, that little dot now appears in the center of every sphere. And what that does is it basically resets the origin to the actual geometry, the center of that sphere, so that we can actually now apply physics. So let's go ahead and click on this bottom sphere. Let's add a rigid body, active. Convex hull should be fine. And then now that we have that, holding shift, you want to highlight everything else, go to object, rigid body, copy from active. And now every single one of these spheres has the exact same physics properties. And now we're on frame 1. Let's go ahead and press play, and let's just see what we get. As you can see, we have some physics. And it wasn't the most exciting physics simulation, but again, this is where you guys get to be creative. It's kind of funny how they all stack on each other. It actually looks pretty silly. Now you can bake this, or you can just play it back over and over again like I am. Very fun to watch. Now, what if we wanted to make things a little bit more bouncy, and we wanted to make these spheres a little bit smaller? First of all, let's click on our bottom one that we want to copy from, and let's go ahead and go to surface response, turn the friction down to 0.2, and the bounciness to 1. Now, the bounciness of the cup also matters, so I'm going to turn the bounciness all the way up to 1, and the friction down to 0.2. Now, we haven't applied these physics to anything else, so let's do the same thing we did before. Shift click, highlight everything, rigid body, copy from active. And now if we go through, each one of these has the same level of bounciness. Now let's go ahead and watch our simulation. Whoa! That might be a little bit too bouncy. Let's turn the value of the cup down first and see if that affects anything, and then come back to the spheres. All right, so it's a little bit too bouncy. Let's go back to our bottom sphere here. Let's go ahead and turn that down to 0.25 for the bounciness, and copy all of these over as well. Copy from active. Let's go ahead and play it back now. As you guys can see, it's way less bouncy. That was way too bouncy there for a second, guys. I am so sorry. Blender wants to freeze up on me. There we go. All right, let's go ahead and play this back and see what it looks like. All right, they're not quite as bouncy as I had hoped, but we can always raise the value again. So let's go ahead and test one more value. Let's do 0.5 and copy that over to everything. Object, rigid body, copy from active. Let's go ahead and play it back one more time. Not seeing much of a difference there, but either way, you guys get the point. So you can adjust this to your liking. Don't adjust it too high or you'll get that crazy result that I did. So I'm actually going to select all these and scale them down by 0.5. I'm going to move them closer to our cup here. I'm also going to minimize my face so you guys can see what I'm doing. And then I'm going to highlight all of them, object, apply scale. And then I'm going to take them and duplicate them. And then I'm going to take all these and I'm just going to center them. That looks pretty good. Now when we play this back, it might be a little bit slow at first, but let's just go ahead and see what we have now. All right, so now we're getting somewhere here. This is looking really cool. Now, what I want to do is I want to create a way for everything to funnel into this cup. So I'm going to go ahead and add in a mesh cube. I'm going to move it up so we can modify it. I'm going to scale it on our Z-axis a little bit like that. And then I'm going to scale it on our Y-axis like that. And I just want to create this thin board for everything to move off of. And I want everything to slide from the board into the cup. So in order to do that, first I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to apply this scale first. I'm going to add in a bevel just to give this a little bit more professionalism here. That looks good. I'm going to apply that bevel, shade smooth, and I'm going to go to my side view. And I'm just going to rotate this along the x-axis, something like that. I'm going to move it down towards our cup. That looks good. And then I'm thinking we can actually go ahead into edit mode, subdivide this a few times. That looks pretty good right there. And then I actually want to apply a modifier to this and see if we can get this thing to be curved, similar to our cylinder here. So let's go ahead to our modifiers. Let's go to simple deform, bend, select the correct axis. So that would be our Z-axis. And then I actually want to curve this sort of like that. So we kind of have this funnel shape. That looks good enough. And I'm actually going to go ahead and apply that. And everything's looking really, really good here. So now what I want to do is I want to have an area for all of our balls to fall down this slide. Again, like I said, guys, I'm not going into this with really any plan, but this is going to look really, really cool when it's done. Now, the first thing we want to do is we actually want to apply a rigid body to our slide here. Let's apply a passive rigid body with type mesh. And then you can just leave these settings as is. Let's go ahead and copy all of our spheres, or sorry, move our spheres up here. And let's go to the top-down view, make sure they're right above our slide here. That looks perfect. I'm just going to try to center them the best that I can. Now, let's go ahead and play this back and just see what we get here. And just like that, we have everything funneling into our cylindrical cup there. So that actually looks really good. Now this is where you guys can get into some crazy stuff, because you guys can actually go ahead and copy all of these physics to any other object, or you can literally take these, scale them down by another 0.5. Oops, sorry. What in the world just happened? I'm so sorry, guys. I was not on frame 1. When you're scaling things down, make sure you're on frame 1. There we go. And I'm going to move these here, duplicate, and then, guys, I'm just duplicating. Shift D is to duplicate. Let's go ahead and move these up. That looks good. Maybe move them down just a little bit. Perfect. All right, so now we have even more spheres to see what our simulation is going to look like. Again, the more that you add, usually the slower it's going to go in your viewport. Let's go ahead and check this out. It looks awesome. And that is just a really quick way to make a fun physics simulation. Everything looks really, really good here. We could go ahead and bake our simulation if we go over to our scene settings and we go to rigid body world and we go to cache. We'll just bake it out to frame 100 and I'm going to click bake. Give that a second. As that rolls through, I'm going to go ahead and check the comments on YouTube. Put another cup, dropping water into the cup maybe. Laugh out loud. I thought this was Epic Games notification were on my PC. No. Yeah, sorry about that, guys. If you guys are seeing those notifications pop up, I apologize. All right. Let's go ahead and see what this looks like. It should be done very soon. I'm going to get some Gatorade to refresh here. As you guys can see, it does take a little bit long for these physics simulations to actually bake. But what helps is doing this, it helps a lot because then you can actually play this back at a high frame rate. We should be able to play this back at 30 frames a second, no issues. Or 24, whatever you decide you want to view this at. I'm really, really curious to see how this is going to turn out though. And then after this, we're going to do the coin dropping tutorial because someone had been requesting that and I have not put that out yet, so I apologize. All right, 98%. We're good to go. Let's go ahead and watch what this looks like. It looks awesome. Let me go for more of a top-down view so we can actually see like the physics here. Looks awesome. Looks amazing. Let's go ahead and take a look. I'm going to also copy the material to our slide here. Looks awesome. Everything's reacting exactly how I would assume it should. And then I'm going to raise the roughness just a little bit so it's a little bit easier to see these spheres in here. Are we on GPU? Yes, we are. We're good to go. And again, if you guys want to see this running a little bit faster, go to your material preview instead. And you will see it running much quicker. That looks amazing. Now, we could really, really take this to the next level. And we could duplicate this like a ton of times. Right? Like we could take this, we could go to our solid view, go to side view, right? Duplicate, excuse me, duplicate. We could take all this, duplicate that one more time. Now, this is a lot of spheres. I also noticed there's just a little bit of a gap right here. I'm going to move this down just a little bit. That looks pretty good. Now you could also accomplish this same thing with an array modifier and repeat the process that we did last time. I'm going to bake this and we're going to come back when it's done baking. So let me go ahead and go to my world settings, delete bake, and then I'm going to bake the new simulation. This is going to take a second because this is a lot for Blender to handle here. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording and come right back. Alright guys, we are back. The physics simulation is finally done baking. It feels like it took forever. Let's go ahead and watch it for the first time together here. Ready for this? It looks really good. And it looks really natural too. Everything falls perfectly. Now this is only going to frame 100 here. So let's go ahead and play it back one more time. It looks really, really, really good. This is the part where I'm going to set up a render and some shots. Now, this is not my favorite camera angle here. Totally okay, but we're going to adjust that and see what we can come up with that we think looks good. Now, the more I look at this, the more I'm like, you know what? Let's add some transparent glass to the cylinder. As much as I love chrome, I'm going to get rid of the current shader on our cylinder cup thing here, and then I'm actually going to go ahead to a new material. I'm going to choose glass. As you can see, this already looks really cool because you guys can just see right through to see all the spheres collecting. Now what I want to do is I want to put this at like 1.2, right? And I just want to lower the roughness to like 0.25. And I just think that looks so awesome. I love that. I think it looks awesome. Could even give it like any color we want, but I'm going to keep it at white for now. That looks cool because then when we have everything shuffle in, guys, this is what it's going to look like. It just looks so satisfying. This came out awesome. Now the slide itself, we could also make that glass if we wanted to. Easily just copy that material over. And then I think I'm going to take my camera, move it up a little bit, and then I'm going to zoom in a bunch. Just really get a nice close-up on that. Now this will be one of like 2 or 3 shots that I'll render out, and then I'll piece them together cinematically and add some sound effects so that I can actually go ahead and post that as a reel on Instagram. And then once I post the reel, I'll just explain to you guys that you can watch the full tutorial on here. Now, more or less, this physics tutorial is finished. So you guys can stop here if you're just looking for the physics. But if you want, I can go into everything else, which I am going to do. So I'm going to show you guys how to set up a few camera shots, adjust some depth of field, things of that nature. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my plane, scale it down a bunch to about there. And I think I want to apply the scale here to our plane. And then I don't know if I really am in love with this material. Let me see what a white material would look like. Now we can still lower that roughness, raise that metallic. That looks pretty cool. I love a nice reflective surface. I just think it looks so good. Make sure this is shaded smooth. Oh, I gotta make sure all those spheres are shaded smooth as well. Let's just make sure real quick. Yep, they look good. This slide could use some work. Let me just look at something. Is this auto smooth? Let me just check. Is this shaded smooth? This slide does not look great. Obviously, we're not going to go and rebake that simulation, but because I'm pretty happy with what we have so far. And guys, I will get to your questions in the chat in a second here. Let me add a subdivision surface to this and see if it helps. Nah, not much. It helps a little bit. I'll do 2 levels. That's fine. I guess I modeled that in a weird way. So you can kind of see that bevel, but that's okay. That's fine. Now, I want to use this as my final camera angle so that when all of these spheres enter the cup, it's going to look really, really good. Why is this not playing back? Oh no! Blender wants to quit on us. Oh, we're good. Okay, that was a little scary moment right there. Anyway, this looks really good. Let's just look into material preview for now. Oh, we can't even see it there. All right, we'll go into solid view and then use this little button up here to go into X-ray mode so we can continue to preview everything. Now we're only going to frame 100, and because we're doing that, I'm actually going to go over to my output settings and I'm going to change the final ending frame range to 100. PNG is fine. I'm going to go into my temporary folder and I am going to make a new folder for our images to output. Now guys, we're outputting an image sequence, which means we need a folder to collect all these images in. So I am going to go ahead and make this folder called shot1. Well, I'm actually going to say spheres. I'm going to say SF for spheres falling 1, SF1, just for a shorthand version, and go ahead and say SF1 for our file name, sorry. Everything's looking good. Let's go ahead and play things back real quick. We don't even need to go to a frame 100, I don't think, guys. I'm having a lot of trouble playing this back right now. Blender wants to, I can tell Blender wants to freeze up, and I don't know why. I apologize for that. I'm just going to scrub through. I want to see the point where they actually stop because I might not go all the way to frame 100. They settle pretty quickly. I guess they settle around frame 100. We'll keep it as is. And let's go ahead to our render settings, 300 samples. Let's try 100 and see what that looks like. Let's go over to our rendered view. I'm going to go to light paths. I'm going to click on fast GI approximation and see what that looks like. I do not like what that's doing to the render, so I'm going to stay away from that. I'm going to make these values all 3. And then I'm going to make volume 0. And then I'm going to mess with transmission until I find something I like. It looks like it needs a minimum of 4 or 5 light paths to look good. And I'm also going to bump the transparency up as well. I'm just going to make all these 5. All right, 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So we'll do 20 total. All right, that looks good. Sorry, guys. I was just getting a phone call. Apologies. This is looking pretty good. Let's go ahead and try to render 1 frame and see what it looks like. Oh, under denoising, also select optics. All right. Let's go ahead and go to our solid view, and let's render this image. Looks like it's going to take about less than 20 seconds. But I'll show you guys a couple more camera angles that I'm going to set up. I'm not going to go through the entire rendering process, but I will show you guys like the overall process. Okay, so that's 13 seconds with denoising. That looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. The only thing I don't like is how it's kind of darker towards the bottom. I'm not sure if that's just the lighting or what. So I'm going to mess around with that in rendered view real quick. I'm just going to move the floor plane up and down. Obviously, okay, so it is actually just the lighting itself. That's fine. All right, we'll keep it at that. The HDRI is giving us some good lighting here, so I like the way that everything looks right now. I'm happy with this shot, so we'll go with this. The other thing I'm going to do before I go to render everything, guys, is I'm going to pop open, or I'm just going to click on motion blur. So I do want motion blur to occur here. So if I go to frame 42 and we click render and render image, watch what this is going to look like, as I want to show you guys. See how we're getting this motion blur here? You're going to get a much more realistic look when you turn on this motion blur. It's going to look really, really good. And if you wanted to increase this even more, you could do like 60 frames a second. This looks awesome though. I'm happy with this. Let's set up another camera shot. This looks really good. All right, we're going to go ahead and render that out later, and it's going to be 100 frames per scene. So right now we have one scene, or what I consider to be a scene, with our main camera. I'm going to go to add camera, and now our camera should be like in the middle somewhere. I'm going to press G to move it so I can see it. All right, there's our new camera. I'm going to snap to that by clicking this little green icon in the hierarchy, and then I'm going to press 0 to actually like snap into our camera view. And now I'm just going to start moving this into a location that I think looks good. Let's go to our rendered view so we can see everything. I think what I want to do, guys, is have a top-down view. So I'm actually going to make my X rotation 0. And I'm going to move my camera to an area that I think looks really cool. I'm going to switch to orthographic perspective. And then I'm going to rotate us around to... Oops, sorry, guys. I'm going to rotate us around to 180 degrees. I'm going to move us up like this to the middle, and I'm going to go ahead and zero out our X location. Let's go ahead and zoom in and see what this looks like. So far, so good. I'm going to tilt us a little bit, move us down, and I'm going to zoom us in. I think something like this will be really cool, and then we could add some depth of field to even get a cooler effect. So I'm going to click on depth of field. I am going to now go to my material preview. Everything's going to be blurry right now. We just need to adjust these settings to get something proper. I'm going to go ahead and start messing with this value here. That looks pretty good. And then we'll give ourselves an f-stop of 4. See what that looks like. That looks cool. Let's try an f-stop of f8. I just think that looks really cool. So if we scrub through here, we also have to adjust the clip. Actually, that looks good. I was going to say the clip start, but this looks cool. So we're going to see these things rushing in like that. This is going to look really, really cool when we go to render this shot because we have this incredible depth of field effect. Again, if you guys aren't happy with the f-stop, you can raise it up to 13 or so. 13 is a little more realistic, maybe even 15. Again, this all depends on how blurred you want everything to be, what you want to focus on. I think this looks cool, so I think I'm going to go with something like this. And then maybe if we really want to, we can give this just the slightest angled tilt. Something like that. Now, if you guys really want to narrow in on your shot even more, you drop down viewport display on the right-hand side here and raise this value for pass part out. And now you're going to see exactly what your shot's going to look like with nothing outside of the crop area. This looks really good. I'm pretty happy with this overall. You can see that everything looks black right here, and that's because we're actually getting the front of the camera is getting cut off. So I'm going to bring it back on the y-axis a little bit until I don't see that black anymore. And then I'm going to move it back up on the Z and over on the Y. That looks good. Now the reason I'm doing that is because we don't want to have any clipping with our spheres. And now I'm just going to adjust the distance while holding shift. I'm going to go back to my material preview. Now, you know what we could do, guys? We could actually animate this shifting in focus. We could start the focus in the beginning. So why don't we do that? Let me go ahead to frame 0, right? Let me focus on all of this stuff up here. Right there. Let me make sure we're in focus. That looks pretty good. Let me check the viewport. All right, why don't we start right about there? I'm going to go ahead and insert a keyframe for the distance, right? We're going to move forward to frame like 80. Why isn't it letting me? Sorry, guys. My computer's freezing up just a little bit. Blender does not like this physics simulation. I'm going to go to the point where like everything is actually in the cup around frame 70. And I'm going to go ahead and adjust our distance until everything is in focus. That's perfect. 8.9. All right. go ahead and look at that. So it's going to go ahead from this frame and it's going to adjust the focus, right? And it's going to actually shift it all the way into the cup. So it's going to start focused on like the bottom of that stack area, and then it's going to shift all the way into the cup here. Guys, this is actually going to be really cool when we go to render this. I'm super excited to see what this ends up looking like. Now, there is one last thing we could do to push this to the next level. We could also rotate the animation, or sorry, we could animate the rotation of the camera as well. So again, I'm trying to show you guys all the tips and tricks that I use to create these really cool shots. I'm not going to go ahead and render everything, but I am going to show you what we're working with here, which is really, really useful information. So hovering over the location and rotation of the camera, I'm going to insert keyframe on both by pressing I when I hover over them. I'm going to move forward to frame 70, and I'm just going to slightly rotate our camera like so. And I think I'm going to move it on the y-axis. Something like that. Let's just see what that looks like. So it's going to start at frame 1. Like I said, guys, my computer is doing a lot right now. It's recording, streaming, so it's going a little bit slow. So it's going to freeze up just a little bit. But let's go ahead and see if we can play this back. I think that looks amazing. The only thing I want to change, I'm going to bring up my timeline down here and go to solid view. I want to go ahead and pop this little tab open on the left. Sorry, let me make sure you guys can see that. There's a little tab on the left. You want to pop that open, and then you want to pop open this drop down right here. And you actually want to go ahead under camera and the camera object transforms. There it is right there. So just select that. Sorry. Where is select? I want to make sure I only have those selected. I believe it is these three right here. I'm going to shift select all of them. Come on. It's not letting me. All right, I'm going to shift select all of them. There we go. And I'm going to move them over, move the last ones over all the way to the end, because I want the camera to move from the start to the finish. And it is not letting me select everything. That's fine. I'll just move all the keyframes over to 100. That's fine. So we have our focus shift from frame 0 to 100. And then we also have our camera moving. So it's going to look a little something like this. Even though Blender keeps freezing up, guys, again, I apologize. I am doing a lot on the computer right now. Will the balls overflow from the cup? No. So it's going to look like this. That looks incredible. All right. I'm pretty happy with that for our second shot. Let's set up one more shot. I'm going to go back to solid view to do this. I'm going to get out of this camera. So guys, just to look in solid view, we have our camera shot. You can see it moving up here if you look from our top-down perspective. Watch it move. See how it's moving, right? So we have that one. This one's stationary. I'm going to keep that one the way it is. And then I'm going to add one more camera, and we're going to find another cool angle. All right, so I have my other camera added, and I'm going to go ahead to this camera, snap to that, and let's go ahead and change this one to orthographic, and let's find a cool angle. I'm almost wondering if we can get a really interesting close-up of our cup from a side angle, like this type of angle right here, right? So I'm actually going to go back to solid view just because it's easier to move things from a top-down perspective. This looks good. I want it to be facing negative 90 degrees, top down. Put it right about there. That looks good. Snap to that. Orthographic perspective. We're good. And we're going to zoom in a little bit. Just go ahead and see what this looks like real quick. Jump to frame 60 or so. That looks pretty good, but I want to be like in the cup. Like I want to be like even closer to the cup. So let's go ahead and move. We're just going to move the scale in a little bit. We're going to move this down. We're going to get a solid 90-degree angle. No, 89. Perfect. Guys, remember, if you hold shift when you adjust things, you can more finely adjust them. That looks pretty good. All right, let's see how this looks. So this would be our angle here. So the balls will be funneling in, and they would settle. I do like that, but part of me wants to be zoomed out just a little bit more. Maybe like that. I think that looks pretty decent. Maybe even slightly more top down. What do you guys think? I actually am pretty happy with that. I might have just the edge of the cup showing because I think it will actually look really, really cool if we have that edge showing. So let's move it along the y-axis. I think, oh, okay. I think that might be the perfect composition right there. So I think I might keep it like that. And I think that's pretty solid. I love the way that light is coming in from the right-hand side. It's just the perfect lighting. Love it. All right, this is looking really good, guys. Really solid. Let me just scrub through and imagine what this is going to look like. Yeah, that looks awesome. Now, again, we can have this camera animated because you can animate anything in Blender. So why don't I go ahead and go to frame 0. Insert keyframe for location and rotation. Go ahead to frame 100. And let's just zoom. Let's just like really get a nice like... Oh, you know what we could do? We could animate it with an empty and have it rotate around the cup. Or we could just kind of like do that by, in the manual way, by doing this. Rotating a little bit like this and moving it along the y-axis. Like such. Hold on. Insert. And insert. Cool. All right, so this is what this shot would look like if Blender would not stop freezing. Apologies again, guys, because Blender's doing a lot for me right now. Blender is really hanging in there, and I'm very, very impressed. All right, let's scrub through. You can barely tell, but we are actually rotating. I actually think that's the perfect subtle amount of rotation. I'm going to highlight those keyframes, right-click, interpolation mode, and Bezier. And then I'm going to go back to this camera, snap to that, highlight those keyframes, right-click, interpolation mode, Bezier, just to smooth everything out. And then I'm going to do the same for... Actually, this one's not animated, so we don't have to do the same for that one. All right, let's go ahead and check our shots real quick. We have this shot. We have a little bit of clipping right here. You guys see how the spheres are getting cut off? So we can fix that by raising our camera up a little bit, tilting it down. But we have to double check that our depth of field is still okay. That looks fine. It'll look cool regardless when we go through. And it's going slow again. But guys, I do think we have all 3 shots set up properly. The next thing I'm going to go ahead and do is render everything out so that we can actually put all of these things back to back. And I'm really, really excited to see what this ends up looking like. This looks awesome. Yeah, this is going to look amazing. We have this beautiful shot here, this top-down shot, and then, of course, our like wide view shot, which as I'm looking at it, I'm like, we probably could choose an even better angle. Like maybe back this up a little bit and then bring it down. I think that looks pretty good. Again, this is why I use the pass part out so that everything around our frame turns black so that we're focused just on what will be rendered. Looks amazing, looks amazing, looks good, looks great. Now, at this point, we have all of our camera shots set up. We're good to go. We're ready to render. This is where we can actually revisit the idea of playing around with different materials. The only other thing I might change is make this material, this glass, different than our glass right here. This glass is perfect. The glass for the cup is perfect. This, I could see myself experimenting a little bit with that. Let me try to make it the floor material and just see what that looks like. Again, that's kind of like a chrome material. Not bad, but I do think that it blends in. It doesn't blend in as well with the scene. So I'm going to undo that. And I might just keep it that way, honestly. Again, this is kind of where you guys can decide how creative you want to be and what kind of materials you want to use. This blue looks really, really cool. If we really wanted to, we could actually apply a different color to this easily. Like you can obviously click on this shader and make this any color you want. We can make this a nice solid gold. Something like that, perhaps. That looks pretty cool. I didn't mind the blue. That looks cool too. But again, this is just like where you guys get to be creative about what you want to do. So, Guys, have fun. Enjoy the physics simulation. Let me know what you end up learning this time, and let me know what you end up doing with these new skills that you've learned today. I do hope you enjoyed this one, and I will see you in the next tutorial.